In a previous video, we added two private properties, number and passwords to our employee class. And in this video, we'll have a look at how we can actually access these properties from outside of this class. First of all, we need to be able to associate the value with the property and then retrieve this value when needed. And the way to do it is to use mutators and accessors, or setters and getters, in other words. Let's quickly have a look at a simple example when we're actually looking at the way we can associate the value with this private number property. We need to have a method which will be of the public visibility and will have one argument which is going to contain the value that we want to associate with the property, and then we simply will be able to associate it from within this method. So let's quickly create this method. Public function set number, and one argument number which will store the value that we want to associate with this property. And what we need to do now is simply do this number equals number. And that's all we need to do. That's our setter. You can use any naming convention you want, but set and get for getters is pretty standard approach. Okay, so we have this set number. Now, if we want to get the value associated with this private property, we need to have a getter. So public function get number. This one doesn't take any arguments, but it returns the value associated with the number property. So we have set number and get number. If we now go back to our index.php, what I can do if I just remove this echo statement here, and let's just uncomment this line. And what I'm going to do is use employee set number, and I'm going to set it to 1, 2, 3, 4. And now if I want to get the value associated with this number property, I simply do echo employee get number. And if we preview everything in the browser, you'll see that we are getting what we've set it with, the set number. So if we go back to the editor, that's all nice, but you might be asking, what really is the point of doing this? Why don't we just make this number public and then we can just interact with this the way we did before? Well, the main reason why you have setters and getters is because sometimes you only want to provide specific interface, because all these public methods allow us to access things that otherwise we would perhaps could override in not quite the way that the system would require this. For instance, setter may do some checks. Is the value, for instance, of the integer type, if not converted to the integer, or throw an exception or an error or whatever else. So, we will in a moment have a look at the password setter and getter, and you will get a bit of a better understanding of why having setters and getters is in some situations better than giving the public access to the property directly. Okay, another thing before we actually go there, I want to show you that this set and get, we can have another method which will combine the two. And we are going to call this method simply a number. So public function number, and it will take one argument, number, but it will be optional. By default, it will be null. And what we are going to do from within this method is going to be if is null number. So if the property has only null associated with it, it means that obviously nothing's been passed through as an argument. Then what we want to do is return the number. So return this get number. We can do it either this way or simply call the number property directly. But if we had anything happening within this get number, let's say we do something with this number before we actually return it, then it's probably a little bit better to actually use methods than directly property, because these methods will return what we actually want to return back to the client. Okay, so this is if the argument is null. Otherwise, what we're going to do is this set number, and we pass the number as the argument, which is the other method. And what we are going to do, just to make sure that this method has consistent return points, because as you can see here, we're returning something, and here we don't return anything. You can see that this my IDE automatically highlights this curly bracket here. It says the missing return statement. It basically has inconsistent return points. it's either returning something or it doesn't return anything. So just to make sure that we are consistent here, let's, after this setter, return null, and that's all we're going to return. And now you can see this highlight is gone, and we know that this method is always returning something. So if we add dog blocks, first of all, to the set number, the set number takes the number as an argument, and this number will be of the integer type. And what this method does is simply set the number, and it doesn't return anything. So what we are going to say, it return void. Now for the getter, we simply say that it gets number, get the number, and returns integer, doesn't have any argument, so there's no param tag for this one. And number method will either set or get the number. So this one is combining the other two together, and it either returns, as you can see, automatically ID figured what's going to happen here. It's either integer, which would be returned when we are calling this get number, or it returns null if we are setting the number. So set or get the number. Let's now test this method. If we go back to the index.php, and I'm going to use, rather than set number, simply call the number, and then I'm going to echo employee and number method without any argument. So as you can see, I'm using the same method, only the first time I'm setting because I'm passing the argument. Second time I'm getting the value associated with the property because I'm not passing any argument. And if we preview everything in browser again, refresh the page, as you can see, result is exactly the same. But now we have two ways of interacting with this private property. We can either use set and get method, or just the number method, which will first check whether we have the argument or not. And then based on this condition, it will either get the number, return the value associated with the number property, or set it to what we are passing through as an argument. Okay, so that's the number. Let's now have a look at another thing I wanted to show you, which is the password property. We have this password property also set to private. So we are going to start exactly the same way as we did with the previous one. So setter and getter. So public function set, this time password, and it will take password argument. And what I'm going to do with this one, rather than just setting it directly as a string which is going to be passed through as an argument, I want this password to be a hash, proper password hash. So what I'm going to do is use the password hash PHP function. So this password equals, and now password hash, and I'm passing through the password argument, and then the constant, which is basically indicating how I want this password to be hashed. It's going to be password default. And please feel free to go to php.net and check the specification for this password hash if you wish to find out a little bit more. Okay, so we're setting the password. So in other words, it's not going to be just a string which we're going to pass, but it's going to be hashed. In other words, if you want to retrieve it later on, you'll see that it doesn't look anything that what we passed through as an argument in the first place. So let's quickly set this getter, public function get password, and we simply return this password, and let's see what we actually get when we try and run it in a browser. So index.php, set password, and let's set it to say secret, and then employee get password, and let's see what we get. Refresh the page, and as you can see, it doesn't look like secret at all, but this is because we're using this password hash function, which does hash our password. It's obviously to make sure that we don't really store plain text password in a database, presumably on the other storage that we could put our password within, our record within. Okay, so that's our set and get password. And let's do the same thing that we did with a number. So we're just going to create the method which is called password. So public function password, and it will take password as an argument, by default null. And if I just scroll up so we can see things a little better. So first of all, we're going to check if the password property is null. So if is null, password, that means that we actually want to get the value associated with the property, so return this get password. Otherwise, we're going to set password, so this set password, we pass password through as an argument, and then return null, just to make sure again that we have a consistent return point. Okay, again, let's put doc blocks for the password. That's going to be a string, and we say set password, and it doesn't return anything, so again return void. For get password, it will return a string, and it gets password, so get password. And for password method, it returns either null or string, probably in a different order, string first, null otherwise. And we're going to say set or get a password. Okay, so these two methods are now ready to use in terms of obviously number and a password, or the other ones, setters and getters for both properties. Let's quickly test it as well with password. Setting here and here, just getting it. So password, if we save it, refresh the page, this will change because every time we are hashing a password, even though we're passing the same string, the hash actually changes. So have a look at this. I'm going to refresh, and it is a different hash, but they all will validate with the function which we'll use in just a moment called password verify. And again, please feel free to go php.net and search the documentation to see what these two functions are actually doing. Okay, so back to the employee, and this time I'm going to create the method public function verify password, and I'm going to, this method will take two arguments. First one will be plain password, there we go, and then hashed password. And what this one will return is simply call to the function password verify, and this one takes the plain password as the first argument and then second as the hash, and it tells us if they are matching. So first we have a plain one. Before we have hash, we obviously have to provide the same plain password, get it hashed with this password or set password method, and then obviously we can compare string plain string with the hash, and it will tell us whether it verifies it, whether it's valid basically. Okay, so again, let's quickly put the doc blocks here. Plain password is going to be string, hash is also of a string type, so string, and it returns boolean true or false. What we're going to say here, verify password for the summary, and let's save it. Let's go back to our index.php, and what I'm going to do here is, rather than echo this employee password, what I'm going to do is cut it. So we have set the password, and now I want to see if it validates. So I'm going to say if employee verify password, and I'm passing through a string as a plain text, our password first, so secret, and then I'm going to use this password method to obtain the value associated with the password property, which is going to be of a hash type, because obviously we've got this password already hashed with this setter that we've got inside of our employee class. So if it verifies, it means if it's valid, then we're going to echo it validates, for instance, and otherwise else we're going to echo it does not validate. So save it, preview it in the browser, refresh the page, and it does validate. Simple as this. We're using the function to hash it first, and then we compare whether this hash matches the password which we actually hashed. So obviously it must validate. That's why we get the result we're getting. So as you can see, setters and getters, pretty simple concept, but it gives us quite a bit of flexibility if we need to do something with the value before we actually associate it with the property. Another way of setting and getting value associated with the properties is by the use of magic methods. If we go back to our browser, let's navigate to a magic methods section under the php.net. And what it says, it tells us the function names, and there is a whole bunch of them, are magical in PHP classes. You cannot have functions with these names in any of your classes unless you want the magic functionality associated with them. And there's a caution, PHP reserves all function names starting with underscore underscore, as you can see all of them start with a double underscore, as magical. It is recommended that you do not use function names with a double underscore in PHP unless you want some documented magic functionality. And then there is a documentation for each of these functions. Let's look at the two that we are interested in, this underscore underscore get and underscore underscore set. First, let's have a look at the set one. So if we go to the set method, it tells us that this method is run when writing data to inaccessible properties. And then for the get, we have it is utilized for reading data from inaccessible properties. But what does it mean, inaccessible property? Inaccessible property is the one that hasn't been declared within the class or has visibility set to private or protected. Let's quickly go back to the editor and have a look at the example. Before we use magic methods, I want to show you that you actually can set and get the values associated with the properties that do not exist or haven't been declared within the class. So let's say we still keep this employee here, and I'm just going to use employee, and I just make some property which does not exist on this class. Let's say age equals 17, for instance. And then I can use echo employee age. As you can see, I'm using dynamic approach because we know we don't have age property on the employee class, neither on the person class. So this property definitely does not exist within this class tree here. And then I'm trying to get the value associated with this property, which obviously doesn't exist. But because in PHP you can associate create properties at runtime, in other words, dynamically when you interact with your code, this is why this is going to work just fine. If we go back, refresh the page, and there we go, 17 number is here. So as you can see, we can create as many properties as we want. We only need the instance of the class, and then we can create as many properties as we want, name them the way we want, and associate the values we want with them. But obviously that's not the best way to work with the classes, because it's the whole point of having a class is to have some certain structure and work with the elements, with the properties of the object that we know this object will contain. Later on, when we're going to be looking at iterators, you'll see how we can also store properties within the array. But before we do this, let's have a look at the way we can actually use these magic methods. So going back to employee class, I'm going to scroll right to the top, and after the password, I'm going to create private property age. And let's give it a doc block. It's going to be an integer. And if we scroll right to the bottom, what I'm going to do now is use this set magic method first. So 2 underscores. All of the magic methods are public in scope. So public function underscore underscore set. And this method takes 2 arguments. First one is the name of the property we are trying to associate the value with. And the second one is the value that we are actually trying to associate with this property. Now, this is when we can do our checks. For instance, we can check if the property actually exists within this class. And if it doesn't, let's throw an exception. We haven't discussed the exceptions yet. We will get to the exceptions at some point during this course. But for now, we're just going to use it just to indicate that something happened that shouldn't, pretty much. Okay, so we're going to start with if and then exclamation mark. And the function that checks for the properties on the given class, on the given instance of the class, is called property exists. And then we pass the first argument is instance of itself of the class that calls this function. In our case, it's going to be pseudo variable this, because we're referring to itself, and then the name of the method, the property that we want to actually check for. So we're going to use this argument name, because this is where the name of the property we're actually trying to access is stored within. So if it doesn't exist on this instance of the employee, and when I say on the instance of the employee, remember this employee class, if we scroll up, extends person. So if it doesn't exist on both of them, or if the person was extending another class, it all will also check within this class too. So basically all the entire tree going up. If the property with a given name doesn't exist within the whole tree, then what we want to do is throw new exception. That's how we throw the exceptions. And as I said earlier, we will get to the point when we're actually going to be discussing these exceptions in more detail. For now, let's just use it. And trust me, we're going to go through it. Okay, so the exception takes an argument, the message that we want to throw. And in our case, I'm going to put it in between the double quotes, so we can actually include the name of the property. And the message will be property, and then in between the curly brackets name. You obviously, again, don't have to use these curly brackets. It's just my kind of thing. Does not exist. So this is the message that's going to be thrown in the browser if we try and set the property that does not exist. So if I was to now do something like employee, and rather than age, let's say shoe size, for instance, equals 12, and save it, let's go back to this employee class. What's going to happen? The set method will first check if this property shoe size exists on our class, on the instance of this class. And if it doesn't, that's the message we should see in a browser. The name will be replaced with this shoe size property. So let's save it, preview it in a browser, refresh the page, and there we go. Fatal error, uncaught exception, property shoe size does not exist. And it's uncaught because we actually haven't wrapped it within a specific structure that works with the exceptions. But we will get to this, as I said earlier, a little bit later on. Okay. So this is the message that's going to be thrown if the property we're trying to use does not exist on a given class instance while we are trying to set the value on it. Okay, but if it does exist, then what we want to do is simply do this and then name, or simply name like this, entirely up to you. This brackets is something that I've been using for a while and I kind of got used to it. And then value. So this is our setter. So that should set now. If I go back to index.php, if I use age, and I'm using this dynamically because this property is private, and if I set it to 12 now, it should set it just fine. So I should be echo employee age. But the problem is, as you can see, it's automatically highlighting. We still haven't got this magic method get in place. So we can set it, but if I try and preview it in a browser, we will obviously get another fatal error. This time it tells us that cannot access private property employee age. So let's quickly fix it with this magic get method. So public function __ get. And this one takes only one argument, which is the name of the property we're trying to access. And again, we could do the same check. We probably should. So let's paste it here for now. We're going to refactor this in just a moment. And then return this and the property name which we are trying to access. These arguments are dynamically put into when these magic methods are called. And obviously they contain the first one for the get and the only one for the get contains the name of the property. The first one for the set contains name of the property and the value we want to associate with it, as I mentioned earlier, obviously. So now if we save it and preview it in the browser, we should get what we've associated with this age property earlier. But this time, all this is happening magically. So we don't have any setter and getter strictly declared within this class. It's just magic method. So if I was to add another property, let's just go back here, private, let's add this shoe size now. We're going to remove it later on anyway, so I'm just going to quickly add the dog block, and it's going to be integer as well. So now if I try and do the shoe size, I'm just going to duplicate all this, and rather than age, let's do shoe size, and let's set it to, say, I don't know, 42. Save it, preview it in the browser, refresh the page, and we see first one is the age, and then we have the shoe size, which is 42. But as you can see, now we can set it. If we were to remove this property completely, shoe size, we're going to get this exception again, because obviously this shoe size does not exist. And all this is because we have this check in place from within this magic method. We're checking if property exists. Otherwise, if that wasn't the case, then we could set and get any property dynamically. As I said earlier, it's not ideal to have it all dynamic. Anyway, so let's quickly extract this portion of a code, which is, as you can see, we duplicated just here in this getter, into a method. So I'm just going to cut it, and the method will be called this property exist, and then name goes as the argument. And I'm going to make the same call here. So I just remove this property exists, and the name goes through as an argument, and let's add this method and put all this logic inside of this method. If we save it, preview it in the browser, it all will work the same way. As you can see, it tells us that shoe size does not exist, same way as before, but this time it tells us that it comes on a different line, because now we're delegating this check to a separate method, 135 line 135, which is within this method here, as you can see. Okay, let's quickly add dog blocks here, and the name is going to be a string, and the value might be anything, so mixed, and summary is going to say mixed d at the end, and a summary is going to be magically set property, and then we go for the get one as well. Name is going to be of the string type as well, and then magically get value associated with the property, and property exists is going to simply take string as well as the argument, and check if property exists on the given instance of the class. Oops, I think 2 S's will be enough. So just to summarize what we've discussed in this video, we have two ways of setting and getting values from the inaccessible properties, whether they have been declared on a class or have private or protected visibility. That is by using mutators and accessors, in other words, setters and getters, or by using magic methods. Now, word of advice in terms of the magic methods: try not to overuse them, try not to abuse the fact that we actually have them available. They are slower than declared setters and getters, that's one thing. Second of all, you should probably only use them in the situations where you really can't declare properties. And these situations could include things like iterators, which are, as I've mentioned earlier, we will be discussing later, or perhaps classes that interact with the database where properties are being set at runtime. And when I say at runtime is this phase during your application lifetime when the code is actually being executed and things are happening based on the request and so on. So that's everything in this video. Let's move to the following one.